Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second breakout session of the day. My name is Caitlin Baker. I'm the creative manager here at GovLoop. And in this session, we're going to talk about how to fail forward and what to do when it doesn't work out. I hope you've been enjoying the session so far. I'm really excited for this session. And we have a great speaker here today. So let's get into it. The work done in government is hard and failure is almost a certainty. But without trial and error, progress doesn't happen. In order to move our teams and agencies forward, as leaders, we have to overcome the anxiety of messing up, which of course is easier said than done. Today, we're going to hear from a leader about how to prepare for the inevitability of failure, what to do when that happens, and how to repair the damage afterward so you and your team can continue to do good work for the people that you serve. But before we get into that, we do have a few reminders and housekeeping slides to go over. So first up, if you're on Twitter, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can follow us at NextGenGov and use our hashtag NextGenGov to share what you learn. We also have the Q&A tab that you should see on your panel there. That is a good place if you have any technical difficulties to put those in. Or if you have any questions for Michael as he's speaking, put them in there and we'll make sure he gets to them. We have plenty of time for questions. We also have our resources, including the slide deck in the panel. You can download the slide deck there if you need it to look through on your own. And then we'll have an on-demand version of this training sent out to everyone after. Also, if you're looking for closed captioning, that should be in the media player. And we have our group chat open. That's the button down at the bottom of the screen where you can chat with other attendees that are on this session. Next up, just to talk a little bit about our CPEs, we're offering CPE credit for these. If you're interested in doing that, you have to do 3 things. Attend this training for the entire duration, take all 3 of the polls that pop up, and then complete the evaluation form. That form can be found in the resource module as well as in the resource center on the main console. So today, speaking with us, joining us for the session, we have Michael Lawyer, old-time NextGen Pro. He's been here several times with us. Michael is the Director of Human Resource Management for the Office of Field Policy and Management at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. He has spent his career helping people uncover a passion for their work and unlocking their potential. And prior to this role, he coordinated and supported employee engagement initiatives across the department. Michael wants to get started with a couple of polls here today, so I'm going to put that out first. So our first question for today is, what is your level of experience as a manager? Are you new? Do you have a manager and feel like you know what you're doing anyway? Or are you just kind of like figuring it out? Michael, over to you.
Hey, everybody. Excuse us for just a second. We're working out a small technical glitch there. So excited to be with you today and so glad to be a part of NextGen again. We're just trying to count how many NextGens I've gotten to be a part of in the past. And I think this is like at least my 7th or 8th, possibly even more than that. So delighted to get to share this time with you while you're doing the poll and so that we have a little bit of time today to talk about failure together. And failure is absolutely one of my favorite things to present on for a couple of different reasons. One, it makes everybody feel really awkward. And when we get into all of the awkward and the embarrassed and they're like, it actually gives us a chance to start growing because that's where some of our most important work is done. Second, it is a thing that comes up in every career. It is something that it's an evergreen skill, just like communication or any of your other foundational management skills. Failure is a thing you're gonna have to wrestle with going forward. And third, the nice part about failure is when you hit a little technical glitch or anything like that, just becomes a learning example for the rest of the training. So you don't need everything to go perfectly. It's all something you can learn from. And I'm just seeing the poll results coming back up here. This is great. Thank you for sharing this with me about yourselves and about where you are in the organization. I see that sort of like our smallest group is probably the one that I have the most empathy for, those folks who have just been put into a management role and are trying to figure it out. And I want to applaud and encourage that 6% of you that were willing to own that you're not quite sure what you're doing yet. And I also want to acknowledge all of those folks who are trying to figure out what management would look like for them, having struggled with a number of different managers, some good, some maybe less good, trying to get some empathy for what their role is and how you might take on that role as well. So thank you for sharing that. I think that this is going to be a great training and a good conversation for us. And I know we have a second poll question as well. So if for those of you, especially those of you who are just looking at that management role or have just gotten into a management role, we have the second poll question for you. So we'll give you all a second to fill that out.
Michael, can you hear me now?
See what drew you to management or what is drawing you into management. Give you just a couple of more minutes to bring that up, and then we will start to dive into the content once we have a sense of where we are. I think one of the things that you will find is the further up you go in the organization, and even that 10% of you all who are now second level managers trying to figure out how to supervise other supervisors, you will know that this is true. The further up you go in the organization, the more you have to deal with failure and the more it becomes a part of your everyday. Because, of course, if things are going well, they don't necessarily rise up in the organization. Everything is fine and on track is not really a status report that the boss gets too worried about. So it's something that we all have to learn to wrestle with, and we will all learn to wrestle with a lot more over the course of our career. And especially the way the world keeps changing on us and the way that we keep moving forward into this post-pandemic world, there are definitely going to be some more bumps in the road that we need to sort our way through. And new experiences are more chances to figure out how to do it wrong before we get to doing it right. So now this is a really interesting poll result back, and I really appreciate the honesty and the straightforwardness of the almost 2/3 of you who know that that is your path to promotion and that that's what you're working on. I would really encourage you to dig deeper into that as well. There are more and more technical roles being opened up for management as well. And if what you really want is the chance to move up in the organization as opposed to the actual chance to help people grow and bring their best skills to work, it's always a tricky thing to wrestle with in terms of how you bring your management style to work and what your motivations are, and then how you can steer that into something that is good, not just for you, but also good for your team and your organization. And how you handle failure is going to be a huge part of that. So let's go ahead and dive into the slides and get to it. So as we talked about, failure, it is just a thing that happens in every career. It is not actually avoidable. And you don't want to totally avoid it in your career. You don't want to take it on more than you have to, but you definitely want to know that it's something that is going to keep coming up in your life and something that you have to be prepared to handle. I worked with a lot of lawyers at one point in my career, and the people who I was always most suspicious of were the ones who said, "I never lost a case." because whenever you probed into it, it meant that they had only taken the easy cases and they had only done the simplest work that they knew was going to settle, and that they never really moved things forward for the people in the organizations that they were there to represent. Never having a failure is not a track record to be proud of. You want to be working at the edge of your capacity, where you begin to really engage on those things, and you know that not everything will go 100% right. Because what we do in government is just really ridiculously hard. Your boss is actually really used to it not going well, and having that come up as something that we want to talk about and that we want to deal with. When you're hiding failure, when you're running away from failure, when you're saying it's not a part of our work, that actually becomes a red flag the higher in the organization you are, that you're maybe not in tune with what's really going on. You're maybe not aware of what's really happening. But I think I skipped a slide by accident here. Yeah, there's one other really important thing that we need to touch on about failure, and that's where failure and equity intersect. I was actually talking with a good friend of mine, but while I was working on this presentation, preparing for it, and in addition to being a friend and a colleague, he is also a Black man who is a professional in DC, and he has a really different reaction to failure than I do. And we had some really candid conversations about the second chances that people get and the way that that can impact people's careers and the way that that can be perceived, and the way he was trained to make sure that he was never seen near failure, because he said he wasn't going to be able to get the dirt off his shoulders if it ever got on there. And that is something that we do have to acknowledge, both in how we're evaluating the failures of others, that is a place where unconscious bias can creep in. And as we're looking at our own career and evaluating the failures and the challenges that we've struggled with in our own career, it does not hit the same depending on your privilege and your place in the organization. It is something that I have been insulated from to a significant amount, which has also been what's given me a ton of practice at failure. And that's where we're really going to spend most of our time here today, is talking about how to do failure well. Because there is a skill set that goes with it that interacts with all of these issues of privilege and opportunity and organizational culture and where you are. I have had the great good fortune to learn those things because I have been held safe from a lot of it. But I do recognize that for you, your experience of that may vary, and the organization you are in may impact that as well. And so be mindful to that as you apply those lessons. And I would love to hear from you all in the Q&A portion of things as we get towards the end about what that's been like for your career and what that has meant for you. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the skills and some of the framework behind failure. And this is the first thing that is just so foundational to understand. I work in HR and I'm evaluating people all day, every day. And there's two things that we try and evaluate based on: competence and character. Competence is quite frankly table stakes. At the staff level, we expect competence. We expect you to be able to do your job. By the time we're talking about management and stepping into those management roles, it's assumed you're competent. What we're really evaluating for is character. And failure is part of what brings out that character and part of what shows us who you really are and how you are really going to be responsible to the organization and to the mission. And so that's one of the reasons that failure becomes so important, is that what you need to be thinking about is not just what do we do to put out the fire, but it is in fact, who are we through this? Because this failure is really your chance to show who you are and your chance to show how you react to the inevitable stress, because there's going to be a next one. And that's actually what your colleagues and your supervisors are worried about. And so we're going to come back to some not to do's, but there's one really simple not to do And I will say, having had to terminate people at times over massive unperformance, this is our biggest red flag. Do not be the person who tries to get out of a fire by starting more fires. And we have seen this when employees get challenged on things, when they get called out. Immediately there's a new drama and a new corner, there's a new direction, stuff is scattered and all over the place. It takes longer to manage those employees, but it is not a great strategy because it makes clear how we are going to handle that. And it makes clear that that's not someone who we can trust in the organization. So when we're talking about character, part of what we're talking about here is to not be the person who amps up the drama and who brings more chaos to the table, but to be the person who tamps it down and helps us get back on our feet so that we're able to handle these things. So to be that kind of person who is always putting out the fires, we're going to walk through a quick little framework we've done of 4 things that we want you to think about and do before failure comes up in your career. It's going to come up. Get these things done as your solid prep work, because this is just the foundationals and the fundamentals that you need to do right at the beginning. Then we're going to talk about what happens and the 3 things that you do when you suddenly realize failure is what has happened and you are in the middle of it. And then we're going to talk about the 2 things that you have to do afterwards when you get to that after action report and you're trying to clean it up. And then we're going to leave you with 1 thing to remember before we jump into the Q&A at the end. So let's start running through those 4 things. The first thing that you want to do before failure rears its head is make sure that you've made friends in the organization. Make sure that there are people who know you and people who trust you and people who understand what you're about. And there's a really simple reason for that. The most important conversations about your career will happen while you are not in the room. I'm going to say that again. The most important conversations about your career will happen when you are not in the room. So somebody who is talking about you in that room needs to be your friend. They need to be your advocate. They need to be the ones to say, man, that doesn't sound like him. I don't know what happened. That Michael guy, no, he's all right. He means well. We'll have to figure this out. There must be more going on here than we think. Because if that person isn't in the room, you've made a bad first impression on how this goes before you're even there and at the table. And that can make it that much harder to dig out and recover. So before any of the negative item, before any of the failure has come up in your career and in your work, make sure that you are out there building relationships, helping other people out, making friends around the organization. And then the second thing, once you have those relationships, make sure that people know that you care about the organization and that you have the best interests of the organization at heart. This is one of the things that people are going to want to know is, why did this screw up happen? And you won't be in the room. And so they're going to come up with motives for you. And those motives will have a lot to do with assumptions and guesses about what your personal brand and your reputation in the organization is. So they need to know that you're somebody who really does have the best interests of the organization at heart. Now, the best way for people to have that impression of you is to actually have the best interests of the organization at heart. I know it seems like a simple and a straightforward thing, but you would be surprised. And particularly as you move into the management roles, and those of you who are already in management, you are really called upon to represent the organization. And I know that this is something that we coach with a lot of new managers. And every now and again, we have a new manager who needs to roll out a policy. And you know what? It might actually be a dumb policy. And we have to have that conversation of, you're not supposed to say it's a dumb policy. You can say, we've heard some of your concerns and we're working through it. But you have to represent the organization's decision, whether you agree with it or not, because that is your job as a manager. Now, when you get back behind closed doors and you're in the decision-making mix, of course, argue and try and get it better and make your point and try and move it forward. But once the decision has been made, as a manager, you have an obligation to represent the organization. And people have to know that you're willing to do that when push comes to shove. The other thing that you want to do when it comes to showing your commitment is you want to have some of those awkward conversations with folks. There will be people who won't necessarily want to get into sincerity about the mission or if what we do really matters because they're like, yeah, it's just a job. Be the person who cares about what you do. Talk about how important what you do is. It's one of the reasons that I love being at HUD. Our mission is so important. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to my colleagues. We sometimes have almost sappy conversations to the point of near unprofessionality about how we care about the people that we serve. People knowing that that's where you're coming from is how you get that forgiveness and how you get that moment of grace to get the opportunity to fix whatever went wrong. So be sure you're having those conversations before you need them. I will also add, just as a pro tip, really does make your workplace a better place to be. Like, if you can actually sincerely care about the work that you're doing because it matters to you, work's just going to be better for you. And if you can't get to that place, spend some time with your mission. Spend some time with the people who it impacts and see if you can get to that place. That is a really important relationship to maintain with as much intentionality as you maintain other critical relationships in your life. So spend that time in your relationship with your mission and why it matters. And if you still really can't get behind it, federal government's big. Got 2.1 million jobs out there. HUD's hiring. Come on over. Find a mission you can get excited about. So another critical step to do before you fail is to do your homework. You don't want the story about your failure to be, oh, Michael just doesn't know what he's doing and he clearly knows nothing about that area of the work. Why did we ever put him in charge of the project? People are okay with mistakes being made. It's harder to find excuses for stupid. So show that you've done your work. Let people know that you've done your work. Make sure that you actually have done your work. There are such things as rookie mistakes and easy mistakes to spot coming. You want to not be having those be your failure. Failure is going to happen. You don't have to volunteer for it by making the rookie moves. Do the homework. Do your best to stay ahead of it, to avoid it. Have had those couple of moments where you're like, we thought this was going to go wrong, but we did our research. We got to this point. We were able to move it forward. Having a couple of those under your belt, again, really help with cementing your reputation and getting you the grace that you need for when mistakes do inevitably occur that even seasoned professionals couldn't see coming. And then the last thing that you want to do before failure crops up in your career is talk with your boss about risk. And this is one of the biggest challenges in the federal government, is that we are a very risk-adverse organization. And that is really appropriate. The stuff we do is high impact and matters to a lot of folks. And I neither want the people guarding our nuclear arsenal nor the surgeons at the VA rolling dice to see, how this comes out. We want folks to be pragmatic and aware and cautious about these things. But there are still risks in the world. And there are times when you have to make a decision saying, this should work out, but it may not. Having pegged those risks ahead of time, having had those conversations with your boss, means that if you had 70-30 odds and everybody agreed that it was good to go with 70-30 odds, 1/3 of the time it's going to go wrong. If your boss said they're comfortable with that, then they're comfortable with that, and you've got the cover that you need to go forward and take the chances. Those are chances that I would generally take where life and safety were not on the line, and we were talking about a 70% chance of moving the mission forward, helping a couple of more people, taking care of things. But the more transparent you can be with your boss and your colleagues about those conversations and about what's going on ahead of time, the better position you will be in when the odds inevitably come up against you. So that's our prep work. That's the stuff that you need to be doing every single day ahead of when a specific crisis comes up or something particularly doesn't go your way. Now let's dive into what actually happens when you're in the middle of something and it falls apart and you suddenly realize, that moment when you realize you're not going to be able to meet the deliverable, the product came back and it's garbage and it's unusable, which you thought was going to make people happy. It turns out they hated and it didn't work. And now you're in a little bit of a meltdown situation. Let's talk about what you do there. And these graphics and these illustrations come to us from our good friends at FEMA. And this is a refrain that you should know from your earliest school days as to what to do when you're on fire. It's also what to do when you've just been lit on fire because something didn't work. The first thing that you do is you stop. It is the basic rule of holes. Stop digging when you find yourself in a hole. And this can be really hard to do, actually, because presumably you only got there because you were excited and you were working hard at something you thought was going to work and was going to move you forward. And it can be really an emotional lift to actually hit the brakes and try and create a moment to breathe and figure out what is happening and stop doing what you thought was such a good idea that it turns out is not a good idea. So I believe we have a poll question here to dig into what some of those feelings and some of those challenges and some of that might be for you all. Can we go ahead and put up the poll here? I want to know, when you hit that it's all falling apart, what is the hardest thing for you about stopping when you've suddenly realized that it's not going to work like you thought it was? We'll give you just a second to go through that. And if we'd been thinking, we would have let you pick more than one because it can be such a complicated blend of feelings, but that will be part of our failure for the day, is that we didn't make this a multiple choice. We made it a single choice button for the poll. But it does bring up a lot of feelings. It does bring up a lot of emotional reactions. And a lot of those things lead to poor decision making and lead to levels of overcommitment to things that if you were in a calmer, rationaler place, you may not be tempted to continue to charge ahead with. So it's really important that we find a certain ability to pause and name that and take a second to figure out what's going on. It's a great reflective habit to get in generally and even to practice ahead of time. But it's absolutely critical when you get that first information back that things are not working, that you stop and check yourself, name and acknowledge the feelings because they're in there and they're going to happen. But then give yourself a minute to get through those and pause before those feelings drive you into continuing to continuing to push things forward when that may in fact only be making it worse. Oh, I know. Oh, my people. I totally feel this. I think I can still fix it is my biggest challenge. I'm like, no. It's still a good idea. It's really going to work if you just give it a little more time. This isn't really a failure. And that is how I have made some of my worst mistakes. Because there's nothing like not realizing you're wrong and then doubling down on the thing that made you wrong. The good news is it's happened to all of us. We have all been there. Recognize it and see if you can train yourself to pull back on that. The work we do in the federal government is really important, and it is a significant impact on people's lives, but we're not superheroes, right? We only have the resources and the abilities that we have. And generally, when we go into these situations, we're already going at max capacity. We're pushing forward as much of what the organization can do. So be aware that when you've been putting your all into it and then things go sideways, there may not be more gas in the tank to go back and fix it. And you need to have that real conversation about what are we actually going to do here? That should be your huge cue to bring other people in and broaden the conversation and admit that you do not have all of the answers. And that's really where we get to on the next step of the process. And that is of course, to drop your expertise, to drop your sense that this is your problem and your problem alone, and to drop your commitment to being the sole source of success here. And it can be really hard to step away from your ego that way. But what you find is once things have failed, the more people you can invite in to helping you succeed, the stronger and the better the organization will come out, the higher the likelihood of getting a good organizational outcome, and the better off that you will be as somebody who acknowledged that there was a problem, brought more people in to fix it, and got the organization to a good place. That ability to drop your ego is one of the core tests of character. Of do you have the character to put the organization first and to humble yourself enough to get what is needed, even if it doesn't come from you. And that, of course, leads to the third part of things, which is to roll with it. There will be a new direction after a failure. If there's not, you missed the whole value of the failure. The failure was there to teach you something about how the organization should be operating. And you need to get on board with that new learning as quick as you can. This will be so much easier to do if you have successfully dropped your ego out of the equation. If you have been able to do that and to bring in new partners and new direction and new excitement around the thing that you're trying to solve, the organization will actually be in a better place. Some of our best organizational change initiatives have actually come out of things not going well and everybody having to stop and really question their assumptions and come to the table with new direction and new thoughts. Get on board with that as quickly as you can. And I do just want to emphasize one more time, like, this is really easy to talk about in a training when none of us is dealing with the situation, like, and all of the angst and all of the adrenaline and all of the emotions and all of the getting yelled at and all of the other things that can be a part of it. And that is why we need to think about these things, where we need to prepare those relationships and do that homework ahead of time, because the more of those friendships you have, that more of a common commitment to the mission you have, that more deep understanding of everything that's going on that you have, that more risk modeling and scenario exercise and planning that you've done with your boss, the easier it will be for you to get through both the emotional work and the actual work of making the pivot to the new solution that's going to help you out of this mess. So hopefully you will be able to, once you realize failure has happened, go through that stop, drop, and roll cycle fairly quickly. And obviously the scale of things can vary, whether it's a major procurement initiative that has been in the works for 3 years now that has fallen apart, or that meeting that you were asked to throw together in an afternoon that maybe didn't have everything prepped, right? It's a different level of scale and a different level of impact, but the emotional journey is in a lot of ways the same. And the better you can get at doing that loop, and the better you can get at recognizing that that is the loop you are in and what you need to do to get through it, the better you will be able to move to the new direction, and the better an opinion of your character the people you work with will have. But where you really cement that is in the after action. And that's where we're going to talk about the last 2 steps. This is particularly for those of you who have become managers. Your critical thing there is to take the blame for your team. It may well have been one of the people on your team who screwed up and caused this problem, and it may be 100% their fault. But as far as your chain of command up goes, you are the manager and it's your fault. And you will think about how you manage them, and you should have managed them differently, and that is on you. And there's two reasons for this. One is it's true, and the other is you're going to have to keep working with that team, and they have got to trust you. And that person who really screwed it up is probably still going to be on your team the next time the next thing comes up. So it doesn't mean you don't have the candid conversation with them. Doesn't mean it doesn't show up in their performance. Doesn't mean you don't address it and get them the training or the resources or the things that they need. But what you don't do is let people higher up in the organization yell at your staff. You take that hit, and I assure you that you will be more respected for it. You will be better appreciated for it. And even if they know you're covering for one of your staff, they will know that you recognize what it means to be a part of the organization and what it means to build the kind of team that will not make this mistake again. Similar to what you need to do with the folks on your team, there will be people who bailed you out. They may or may not be on your team, but they might be your partners. They might be somewhere else in the organization. They might even be your boss. Thank and acknowledge them. You are going to need their help again. Make sure that they get the credit. Make sure that they know that you saw their contribution and that it mattered to you. Again, that is part of that test of character, and that is part of that continuing to build your organizational reputation so that people continue to be willing to help you out again. Because failure is going to not just happen, but keep happening in your organizational life. And so there is one thing that I want to leave you with to remember before we jump over to the Q&A for our last few minutes together. And if I can get the slides to work right, I will. There will always be something going wrong somewhere in the organization. And it will always be a question of how you reacted to that thing that is going wrong. People aren't going to blame you for the fact that stuff went wrong. People know stuff goes wrong. They're going to take issue with you for how you react. They're going to praise you and be grateful to have you on the team for how you react. Work on your character. Work on being that person who is genuinely concerned about doing what is best for your organization. And that will be seen, and it will get you through. So with that, let's flip it over to the Q&A. I would love to hear in the last couple minutes we have left about some of your experiences or any questions that you may have with what happened here. So do we have any great questions from the Q&A that we can get in the team chat?
All right. Can you hear me, Michael? We're having some technical difficulties. Thanks, everyone, for your patience. Michael wasn't able to hear me earlier, so I think he's going back to hear me now.
Through now. Technical assistance on the back end work. Thank you, excellent NextGen producers.
Just rolling with that failure. No, I really appreciate you being here today in this presentation. I love the stop, drop, roll metaphor because I think it's that, like, the stopping and dropping is really the hard part for me of being like, I'm not actually on fire. Like, I'm fine. What are you guys talking about? Like, failing? No, thank you. And so it's a good reminder that, like, it's fine. And sometimes you do just need to accept it. So yeah, if anyone has questions, throw them in. I do have a question, kind of getting back to earlier, when you're mentioning, like, don't be the person who's, like, lighting the extra fires. Do you have any tips for navigating working with someone who is that person, like for how to approach the person who makes everything bigger than it needs to be?
One of the hardest things in government. The first is, like, in as much as you cannot work with them, don't work with them. Don't always get that choice, right? But, like, stay away from those folks in the organization if possible, because it doesn't make anything better. The first thing to do is, honestly, keep receipts. Like, get your documentation in order, because part of that will be like, oh, this thing happened, and then Michael did this, and then he did that. And then you just forward the email of like, here is the actual email I sent. Here's the information that I provided ahead of time that they said they didn't have. When that drama crops up, just very firmly keep what you can control, keep the documents in place. Don't turn it into a blame thing. There's an old Mark Twain quote, never argue with an idiot. They'll drag you down to their level and then beat you with experience. And it's kind of the same thing. Like, you can't let yourself get sucked into the drama because the person who is all drama all the time is just better at it than you are. And so what you want to do is just very calmly and very quietly keep the receipts. This is what we did, boss. This is where we go. And like, your reputation is known in the organization. Their reputation is known in the organization. And that's where, yep, the conversation may happen while you're not in the room. And your boss may look and be like, no, yeah, I know Michael, and I know that person, and I know who I'm going to trust and where I'm going to go with this one. And that's where your reputation and the work that you've done ahead of time will really protect you and support you through that. But yeah, whenever possible, try and stay on the other side of the organization from those folks.
Yeah, I mean, excellent advice. Don't want to fight fire with fire. Back to it. We did have one question. How do you deal with employees who love to complain but never want to put it in writing?
I've got a little bit of frozen video. I'm not sure if I had a connection challenge here come up again. But are there any other questions from the Q&A that we want to engage with?
There's one. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Caitlin.
Yeah, I see the comment in the Q&A about, when one of those folks is on your team and you don't have an option to get away from them. Yes, when you have a high drama person on your team as a manager, you have absolutely got to coach them on that, and even to the point of conduct discipline. And we have gotten there with some of our managers on that disruptive conduct is a chargeable offense. And obviously you don't come out with the reprimands and the suspensions right away. You do the coaching, you do the targeted coaching, you do the, hey, did you see how this was impacting your effectiveness in that meeting? You came in all drama and nobody wanted to listen to you, so you didn't get what you wanted. Help people understand that. I also see the question here from Katie about overcoming feelings of shame and sadness. Yeah, those are really hard. And that can fit a whole bunch of stuff that's going on, and it can be bouncing off of a whole bunch of stuff that's going on. That's like serious lifetime work, and that's where working on your character, and it's both at work and at professionally, and it's also the like, do your work at home. That hits a lot of different stuff. I am a huge fan of therapy. I am a huge fan of executive coaching. I am a huge fan of finding a healthy community to be a part of. All of those things are really important supports to me and to people I know who have done this well. And I will also say that I have really come to rely on, and this may be our secret lesson before we close out today, my everybody sucks theory. Which is that basically we're all terrible all the time, and some of just are occasionally actually kind of nice and functional, but that's sort of the rare exception. So yes, I get that guilt and that shame and that like, oh, I did it awful. But you know what? My boss is also awful, and my colleagues are also awful, and my team is also awful. We're all awful and doing just the best we can, and sometimes we get it right, and we really do make a difference in people's lives. And grounding it back in the mission and in the change that you're able to make in people's lives, despite the fact that you're not perfect and it's not on you to be perfect, has been hugely important to me in my professional growth. And Katie, I wish you the absolute best as you're continuing to work with that, because that really is a lifetime of work of wrestling with that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you.
I believe we are at time. And I know we're having just a little bit of a hang up in my communication with the producer. So, Caitlin, why don't I throw it back over to you to wrap up and make sure that we have any last announcements that we need for folks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michael. I don't know if you can hear me, but thank you for being here today. I really have enjoyed this session. I know I'm definitely going to take some of this with me and my team. The stop, drop, and roll metaphor, I think is just great. I also want to thank our NextGen Alliance partners today. American, Blue Cross Blue Shield, GEHA, Gov White Papers, Red Hat, and Rubric. These sponsors are all of the reason that we are able to be here today and offer NextGen for free for everyone. So very exciting. And then coming up next, this session will be available on demand after it's over, as well as the rest of the training will all be emailed out to you. You'll get that in your email. You can access all the other breakout sessions you weren't able to be a part of today, or go watch this one again if you're interested in that. We have the leaderboard. We're keeping up with that on the back end. It might not be up to date, but the more active you are, the higher you'll get on the leaderboard. And then if you do want the CPE credit, please remember to take the evaluation. It should be in the Resource Center here, as well as in the Resource Center in the main console. If you weren't able to answer the polls, but you were here, please just send us an email, and we are able to kind of fix that on the back end and make sure that we record you and get you your credit. Coming up next, we have a little bit of a break, and then we have our final keynotes of the day, setting effective boundaries from work life to home life. I feel like this is especially relevant in our hybrid work era. And then also being more than a cheerleader, how to truly inspire your team. Thank you everyone for being with us today. We're so glad you decided to take some time to join us. Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate it. And with that, I will leave you.